Most doctors won't bring this up during a checkup, but let me be direct. If you're over 60 and you've stopped masturbating, your body may already be breaking down in quiet, invisible ways. And the truth is, you probably don't even realize it. This isn't about taboo or temptation. It's about real, measurable health, your blood flow, your hormones, your prostate, your sleep, your brain function, and yes, even the way you feel about who you are. I'm Dr. Richard Langford, a men's health specialist, with over 3 decades of experience helping men over 60 regain the energy, vitality, and sexual confidence they thought was gone for good. I've worked with thousands of men who quietly believed they had to surrender this part of life. But what they discovered when they reconnected with themselves wasn't just more pleasure. It was better sleep, sharper focus, stronger immunity, better control of their body, and a surprising lift in self-worth. Here's what most people don't realize. Your sexual activity, including solo stimulation, is one of the most natural and powerful tools your aging body still has to protect itself. It's not a leftover instinct from your younger years, it's biology. It keeps your hormones regulated, your prostate clear, your brain active, and your emotional health grounded. And when you stop, those systems begin to deteriorate silently, slowly, until one day, you no longer feel like yourself and you don't even know why. That's why today I'm walking you through 7 real and often invisible consequences of giving up self-intimacy in later life. This isn't scare tactics, it's science. And it might just explain some of the fatigue, mental fog, or emotional flatness you've been feeling lately. Stick with me because we're going to look at what's really happening inside your body, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss tips that could genuinely protect your long-term health. And if anything I've said so far feels like it's hitting home, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, type 0. Your response helps me understand what matters most to you and helps others feel seen too. Now let's start with the first consequence, and it's one I see far too often in men who think this part of their life is behind them. It starts deep in the prostate, and if left unchecked, it can affect far more than just your urination. It always begins quietly, just a few extra trips to the bathroom, a bit of pressure. You can't explain a weaker stream than you remember. You chalk it up to aging, maybe blame the coffee, maybe think it'll pass. That's exactly what Frank thought, a 72-year-old former police officer who sat across from me with bags under his eyes and frustration in his voice. "I'm up 5 times a night, Doc. I can't sleep. I can't rest. I don't feel like myself." When I asked if he was still sexually active in any way, even on his own, he looked down and said, "I just figured I didn't need that part of life anymore." That moment right there is where too many men begin to lose control over their health without realizing it. Because what Frank and many others like him didn't know is that the prostate is not passive. It's not some unused part that goes dormant with age. It's a dynamic organ. It expands, it contracts, it produces fluid, and it needs to be cleared regularly to function properly. When that doesn't happen, when the fluid stagnates, something dangerous starts to build. Pressure, swelling, inflammation, all of it silently disrupting your ability to urinate comfortably, sleep through the night, and even perform sexually. What starts as a mild annoyance slowly becomes a daily battle. And here's where it gets even more serious. If this congestion is left unresolved, it can lead to benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, which affects nearly half of all men over 60. BPH isn't just an inconvenient acronym. It means waking up every hour to pee. It means straining with a weak stream. It means never really emptying your bladder. And in some cases, it means infections, catheters, even surgery. That's what happened to Frank. Eventually, the pressure built up so much, he had to undergo a procedure just to get relief. And I'll never forget what he told me afterward. "Doc, if I'd known something as simple as that could have made a difference, I would have never stopped. Let me be absolutely clear here. We're not talking about chasing pleasure or chasing youth. This isn't about fantasy. This is about function. Regular ejaculation, including through masturbation, is a natural and powerful way to flush the prostate, support circulation, reduce inflammation, and In fact, a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that men who ejaculated more than 21 times per month had a significantly lower risk of developing prostate cancer compared to those who did less. That's not folklore, that's data. That's something every man over 60 should hear, and no one is saying it out loud. Because when you stop engaging with your body in this way, you're not just stepping back from pleasure, you're slowly surrendering your independence. I've seen men become afraid to leave the house because they don't trust their bladder. I've heard men map out every drive based on gas stations and rest stops. That's not living, that's adapting to avoid embarrassment. That's shrinking your life to fit a symptom that could have been managed, sometimes reversed, if only you'd known how critical self-intimacy really is to prostate health. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you gave your body a reason to let go, to reset itself naturally, without medication, without shame? Because the truth is, what's happening in your prostate doesn't stay in your prostate. It spreads. It touches your confidence, your freedom, your peace of mind. And it doesn't stop there, because the next consequence doesn't just live in your body, it starts taking root in your mind. What happens when the brain no longer gets the stimulation it needs? What happens when you begin to forget things? Not because you're old, but because your brain is quietly starving. Let's talk about it. The truth is, what starts in the body often makes its way to the brain. And for many older men I've treated, this next consequence creeps in so slowly that by the time they notice it, it's already reshaping their entire daily life. It's not loud, it doesn't scream for attention like chest pain or a fever, but it changes everything: your confidence, your memory, your ability to feel like yourself. I remember clearly when George, a 68-year-old retired math teacher, came into my office. He looked sharp, well-dressed, polite, but behind his eyes there was this fog. Doc. He said I walk into rooms and forget why. I lose my train of thought while speaking. I feel slower. Not confused exactly, just not me. I asked him about the usual suspects: sleep, stress medications, all normal. But when I gently brought up his sexual routine, he gave a nervous laugh and said, "I haven't touched myself in years, didn't think it mattered anymore." That's the mistake so many men make. They disconnect from solo intimacy because they think it's tied to youth or shame or vanity. But in reality, masturbation for seniors, especially men over 60, is one of the most natural ways to maintain mental clarity and emotional grounding. When you engage in self-stimulation, your brain releases a powerful blend of neurochemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. These aren't just pleasure hormones. They're critical for mood regulation, memory focus, and motivation. They calm the nervous system, boost blood flow to the brain, and keep your mind agile and alert. Now imagine cutting off that flow, not for a day or a week, but for months, even years. Without those chemical surges, your brain slowly begins to dim. Thoughts take longer. Emotions flatten. Decisions feel heavier. You may not even notice it at first. Just a little forgetfulness here, a missed appointment there. But over time, that fog thickens. You hesitate when speaking. You avoid reading. You stop engaging in conversations that once energized you. It's not just cognitive, it's deeply emotional. And here's the kicker. Many men in this stage start to wonder if they're developing something more serious. I've had patients ask me if they're showing early signs of dementia. I've had men cry in my office because they no longer recognize their own minds. But what if I told you this fog, this mental slowness, might not be disease at all? What if it's simply disuse, a lack of regular sexual stimulation, depriving the brain of what it needs to stay alive and awake? Studies have shown that men who remain sexually active, including through masturbation, experience slower cognitive decline as they age. According to a 2017 study published in Age and Aging, older adults who remained sexually active scored higher in tests of memory and executive function than those who didn't. This isn't fantasy, this is science. And it aligns with everything I see in my practice. In fact, one patient, Sam, 71, former engineer, told me something that still sticks with me. After years of not touching himself, he decided to reintroduce regular solo intimacy into his routine, not for pleasure, but for mental clarity. "Doc," he said, within a few weeks, "I felt like someone had opened a window in my head. Things just made sense again." What if your brain isn't broken? What if it's just waiting for the stimulus it's been missing? So let me ask you, have you felt foggy lately? Forgetful? Disconnected from the sharpness you once had? Before you panic, before you blame age, or fear the worst, consider this. Maybe what's missing is something your body still remembers how to do. Something as simple as reconnecting with yourself quietly, privately, without shame, might be the spark your brain has been craving. Because when you stimulate your body, you awaken your mind. And as we're about to explore next, that same disconnection that dulls your memory can also dull your emotions sometimes to the point of numbness, sometimes to the edge of something even darker. So stay with me, because what comes next may be even more important. And just like the fog in your mind, there's another kind of silence that creeps in. It doesn't affect how you think, it affects how you feel. I see this often in men who've slowly withdrawn from themselves. They stop feeling things. Not just excitement or desire, but joy, pride, connection. Emotions flatten like a dead radio station. And they assume that's just what aging does. But it's not. Let me tell you about David. He was 66 when he first walked into my office. Widowed for 4 years. Retired long-haul truck driver. Quiet guy, tough exterior, but something in his voice was different. He said, "Doc, I don't laugh anymore. I don't cry. I just exist. No diagnosis. No obvious illness. Just a gradual dimming of his emotional world." When I asked about his habits, his diet, his movement, even his intimacy, he shook his head. "I haven't had that kind of release in years. Doesn't seem right at my age. That's where we've gone wrong." Somewhere along the way, society convinced older men that pleasure is shameful, unnecessary, or immature, that reconnecting with your own body is selfish or sad. But the science says otherwise. Regular self-intimacy, particularly through masturbation, triggers the release of oxytocin and endorphins, your brain's natural emotional balancers. These aren't just feel-good chemicals, they're connection hormones. They calm your stress response, help regulate mood, and open the gates for emotional resilience. Without them, what starts as low energy quickly becomes emotional numbness, and eventually detachment from life itself. David described it best when he said, "I don't feel broken. I just feel like I'm watching my own life from outside the glass." Can you relate to that? That strange emptiness where even good things feel muted. That sense that the highs don't lift you and the lows don't move you. That's not just aging. That's disconnection from your nervous system, your hormonal rhythm, your emotional anchors. Now here's where it gets real. When emotional numbness sets in, other risks follow. Anxiety, depression, apathy, even suicidal thoughts. And yet the solution might be something as basic and as natural as touching your own body. It sounds simple, but it's powerful. Because every time you give yourself permission to feel, to release, you're reminding your brain that you're still alive, still connected, still capable of experiencing pleasure and peace. A 2020 review published in Sexual Medicine Reviews confirms that older adults who maintain sexual expression alone or with a partner report significantly higher levels of emotional satisfaction, lower rates of depressive symptoms, and stronger social engagement. That means your brain and heart still respond. They're not done. They're just waiting. So here's the real question. Have you mistaken emotional silence for wisdom? Have you accepted numbness as a sign of maturity? What if the truth is, you stopped giving yourself permission to feel? What if everything you think you lost isn't gone? It's just asleep. David didn't need a prescription. He needed reconnection. I walked him through gentle ways to re-engage his body, and within a month, he came back with tears in his eyes. "Doc," I cried, watching an old movie the other night. I didn't know I still could. That's what this is about. Not lust, not youth, but life. Life that still wants to be felt, even at 60, 70, 80. And this emotional stillness doesn't just weigh on the heart. It starts to infect your nights. Because when your body stops feeling safe, your sleep suffers next. And that's what we'll uncover in the next section. Why so many older men toss and turn at 2 a.m. and how your nervous system might be crying out for something you haven't given it in years. Don't go anywhere. When your heart goes quiet, your nights often go loud. That's the irony I see in so many of my patients. They no longer cry, no longer laugh, but they can't sleep either. That was exactly the case with Harold, a 74-year-old former mechanic who sat across from me one rainy afternoon, eyes swollen from exhaustion. "Doc," he said, "I wake up every night at 2:30, can't fall back asleep. My body feels tense, but my mind's blank. What the hell is happening to me?" Harold wasn't depressed. He wasn't on stimulants. His blood pressure was managed. His heart was steady. But what he didn't realize was that his nervous system had been operating in high alert for months. And part of that came from a lack of healthy sexual release. You see, regular self-intimacy, especially through masturbation, triggers a full-body relaxation response. After climax, your body shifts from the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight mode, into parasympathetic dominance. That's your rest and digest state. That's where deep, restorative sleep begins. Without that transition, your body stays subtly braced, like it's waiting for danger. Even if your mind is calm, your muscles stay tight, your breathing stays shallow, and your cortisol, the stress hormone, lingers just high enough to keep you from slipping into true rest. This isn't a guess, it's biology. Sleep researchers at the University of Central Queensland found that men who engaged in sexual activity, including solo intimacy, before bed fell asleep faster, experienced longer periods of deep sleep, and had lower markers of overnight stress. But here's where it gets darker. Lack of sleep doesn't just make you tired, it chips away at your memory. It reduces testosterone. It impairs immunity. It increases your risk of heart disease and cognitive decline. And more than anything, it kills your willpower. So many men come to me saying they've lost discipline, drive, patience. But often, it's not weakness, it's sleep debt. And that debt is collecting interest. Harold told me that every time he woke up in the middle of the night, he felt embarrassed. "I don't want to admit it, Doc, but I miss the old days. When I'd take care of myself, roll over and sleep like a stone." And I told him there's no shame in that. In fact, reclaiming that part of yourself might be the very key to healing the rest. Have you ever felt tired all the time? Even when you think you've rested? Do you feel like no matter how early you go to bed, you still wake up groggy, irritable, detached? That's not just aging. That's your nervous system screaming for balance and being ignored. And the solution might be simpler than you've been told. I worked with Harold on bringing back that release, not as a guilty pleasure, but as part of a bedtime routine, just like brushing your teeth or turning down the lights. Within 2 weeks, he came back glowing. "Doc," he said, "I haven't slept this well since my 30s, and I didn't take a single pill. So here's the question I want you to sit with tonight. Are you losing sleep, or are you losing connection? Because the body remembers what it needs, and sometimes what it needs is exactly what you've denied it for far too long. And this denial, it doesn't just affect your nights. It shows up in the mirror, in your muscles, in your skin, in your energy. Because next we're going to talk about something most men never link to intimacy: muscle mass, strength, and vitality. What if the real reason you're feeling weak and slower isn't your age, but something else entirely? When Harold told me he was finally sleeping again, the first thing I asked was, "How's your energy?" He gave me a half smile and said, "Better than I expected, but my knees still feel like rubber." And that's when we shifted the conversation to something most men over 60 notice, but almost never talk about: the slow, silent erosion of physical strength. That brings me to Curtis. 68, former firefighter, built like a tank in his prime. When he came into my office, he looked like a man still carrying his old strength on his shoulders, but you could see the fatigue in his posture. "Doc," he said, "I used to climb ladders 2 stories high with a hose on my back. Now I'm winded just mowing my lawn." At first glance, Curtis was doing everything right. He walked regularly, lifted light weights, even watched his sugar. But there was something deeper happening. And when I asked if he still had any private solo release, he looked down and muttered, "It's been a while." He didn't think it mattered, but it did. You see, regular sexual stimulation, yes, including masturbation, isn't just about desire. It's directly tied to natural testosterone support. And testosterone isn't just about libido. It affects muscle repair, strength, red blood cell production, even your metabolism. According to research from the Mayo Clinic, consistent sexual activity in older men correlates with higher levels of free testosterone, the active form that keeps your energy, performance, and vitality up. When Curtis stopped engaging in intimacy, even privately, his testosterone began to drop. Not in a dramatic way, but enough to cause muscle loss, slower recovery, and yes, that nagging fatigue. It wasn't age, it was chemistry. His body stopped getting the hormonal signals that said, "Stay strong, stay ready." Have you felt that too? You try to eat right, move more, even take your vitamins, but something still feels off, like your body is running at half power no matter how hard you try. I guided Curtis through a safe, shame-free return to solo intimacy. Not as a chore, not as fantasy, but as an act of self-care. He told me, "Doc, it was weird at first, like shaking hands with a stranger. But the next day, I felt this weird buzz in my legs, like my muscles remembered something." That's the beauty of the male body. It remembers. Even after years of silence. And the more Curtis reconnected, the better his results. We tracked his labs. His testosterone rose by nearly 18% in 60 days, naturally without medication. He said his workouts felt easier. His posture changed. Even his handshake came back firmer. That's what natural testosterone support looks like. No shortcuts, just alignment. Now let's be clear. I'm not promising miracles. But I am telling you this. If you've lost strength, stamina, or physical confidence, the solution may be closer than you think. You don't need to chase exotic supplements or extreme routines. Sometimes your body just needs permission to switch the engine back on. And yes, sometimes that ignition is something as simple and private as reconnecting with yourself. So ask yourself, has your strength faded because of age? Or because of disuse? Have you stopped stimulating the very systems that kept you strong for decades? If your body was a car, when was the last time you revved the engine just to keep it alive? And here's the twist: when your strength fades, it doesn't just affect your body. It affects your immune system, your ability to fight off illness, your resilience in the face of stress. And that's exactly where we're headed next. You won't want to miss this, because what I reveal in the next section may completely change how you think about long-term health and disease prevention. What most men like Curtis don't realize is that the benefits of reconnecting with their own vitality don't stop at muscles or stamina. They extend much further, deep into the body's core defense system, the immune system. When he started sleeping better, moving better, and standing taller, I asked, "Have you noticed fewer colds?" He blinked, then laughed. "Now that you mention it, yeah. I haven't touched the medicine cabinet in months." That wasn't just coincidence. It was biology at work. You see, regular sexual activity, even solo, has been shown to boost the immune system by increasing immunoglobulin A, or IgA, the body's frontline defender against viruses and infections. In a controlled study published in Psychological Reports, researchers found that men who engaged in self-intimacy at least once or twice a week had significantly higher IgA levels than those who abstained. That's not New Age talk, that's immune science. And that brings me to Michael. 69 retired teacher, never smoked, rarely drank, but always felt like he was the fragile one in his group of golf buddies. Seasonal colds, sniffles, fatigue. He just chalked it up to bad genes. But when we looked deeper, the truth came out. Michael had slowly withdrawn from every form of physical self-connection. He said, "After my wife passed, I just didn't feel like that part of me had a place anymore. It broke my heart to hear it. But I knew what needed to be done. Not with pills or clinics or gadgets, but by giving him permission to reclaim a part of himself he thought had expired." Within weeks of simply embracing solo intimacy again, Michael reported better sleep, brighter mornings, and most notably, 2 full months without a single cold. That may sound small, but for a man who used to stock tissues in every pocket, it was monumental. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you thought of intimacy, not just as desire, but as protection, as resilience, as medicine? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Many senior men unknowingly weaken their immune defenses, not because they lack supplements, but because they've stopped sending their bodies the physiological signals of vitality. And those signals are real. When a man experiences sexual release, his body releases oxytocin, and dopamine lowers cortisol and improves circulation, all of which are tightly tied to immune function and inflammation control. Think of it this way. Every time you engage in healthy self-intimacy, you're not just satisfying a private urge, you're activating a system of hormonal balance that improves your odds of staying healthy longer. But here's the twist. This part of health immune support through sexual activity is almost never discussed in conventional doctor visits. Why? Because it's seen as taboo. It's too private, too uncomfortable. And yet for men over 60, this silence comes at a cost. The longer you ignore your body's biological language, the less it speaks up when real threats arise. Michael said something that stuck with me. "Doc, I used to feel like my body was just slowly giving up, but now it feels like it's listening to me again." That right there is the shift I want for you. From silence to responsiveness, from dormancy to dialogue. And just when you think this connection ends with immunity, there's one more layer we need to talk about. Because beyond the prostate, beyond your muscles, beyond your sleep and immune system, there's something far more subtle at risk: your mind. The seat of your memory, clarity, and identity. In the next part, I'm going to show you how the absence of sexual stimulation can quietly erode your cognitive sharpness and what you can do to stop it before it's too late. When Michael told me it felt like his body was finally listening again, I knew he was just scratching the surface. Because beyond immune defense and physical energy lies something even more sacred: our mental clarity, our ability to think, remember, and stay sharp. For many men, that's the final frontier, the thing they fear losing most, even more than strength or desire. And yet, ironically, they rarely realize how much their brain depends on their body's most intimate signals. Let me introduce you to Charles, 72, former accountant, meticulous, sharp-minded, always prided himself on remembering every digit of his social security number backward. But then, slowly, something began to slip. He couldn't recall where he left the car keys, forgot his daughter's birthday. At first he joked about senior moments, but deep down he was scared of losing who he was. And honestly, so was I. We ran tests, blood work, MRI, vitamin levels, all normal, but there was something else I needed to ask. "Charles," I said gently, "when's the last time you felt connected to your own sensuality?" He looked down. "It's been years, Doc. After the prostate surgery, I just turned that part off. Felt like it wasn't mine anymore. This is the part no one tells you. Sexual stimulation, yes, even through masturbation, isn't just about pleasure or release. It activates multiple brain centers, the hypothalamus, the limbic system, the prefrontal cortex. It floods the mind with oxytocin and dopamine chemicals that boost motivation, memory, and emotional resilience. According to research published in Frontiers in Psychology, sexual activity in older adults is directly correlated with better word recall and higher cognitive performance. This isn't speculation, it's neuroscience. So let me ask you, what if the fogginess you feel isn't just from age, but from neglecting the one activity that used to keep your brain bright? That was Charles's wake-up call. With slow, guided steps, nutritional support, light, physical therapy, and yes, permission to re-engage with self-intimacy, he began to feel like himself again. The keys returned to the hook. The birthday was remembered. But more than anything, his eyes changed. "I don't feel invisible anymore," he said. "I feel like Charles again." And that brings me to a truth many men don't want to admit. When we stop honoring our physical desires, we don't just lose sensation, we lose parts of our story. Our boldness, our confidence, our ability to feel alive. Now imagine this. What if a simple private ritual could help preserve your memory? What if 10 minutes of intentional connection with yourself could improve your sleep, your mood, your clarity, and just maybe your sense of purpose? You see, sexual health isn't just about performance. It's about presence. It's about staying in touch with the rhythm of your own body so that your brain doesn't drift into silence. When you stop stimulating, your dopamine circuits begin to dull. Your prefrontal cortex loses activation. And over time, this can create a cascade of forgetfulness, irritability, and low mood. The exact symptoms that many chalk up to normal aging may in fact be signs of disconnection. And here's the real kicker: Charles wasn't alone. In a national survey on aging and intimacy conducted by the University of Chicago, over 60% of men above 65 who reported regular self-intimacy also reported better memory function and stronger emotional well-being compared to those who abstained entirely. Yet how many doctors ever tell you that? How many even ask? So if you've been feeling foggy, out of step, or like you're slowly fading into the background, I want you to remember this. Your body still remembers how to be alive. Your brain is still wired for passion, clarity, and connection. And sometimes all it takes is a spark of permission to light it up again. And if you're wondering, okay, Doc, I get it. But what if I've been doing it wrong this whole time? Well, that's exactly what I want to walk you through next. Because while self-intimacy can unlock strength, clarity, and immunity, it can also backfire if done with the wrong mindset or in harmful ways. In our final section, we're going to break down the 5 biggest mistakes men make when it comes to solo intimacy and how to avoid them, so you can finally turn this into a lifelong tool for vitality, not regret. So if you've made it this far, I want to tell you something simple but powerful. It's never too late. Not to reconnect, not to repair, not to reclaim the parts of yourself you thought were lost to time. Your body hasn't given up on you. Your mind is still listening. All it takes is for you to show up for yourself. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. Start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to feel again, because vitality isn't just about muscles or testosterone. It's about permission. Permission to age with power, not fear. And as the great Carl Jung once said, a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. So go ahead, reclaim yours. If this message spoke to you, hit that subscribe button to keep walking this journey of strong, healthy living after 60. Drop me a comment. What's the one thing about aging that worries you most? I read every single one and respond in future videos. And share this video with so you've got more life to live. Let's live it well.